What is pitching?
Pitching is ultimately just talking about your story and selling your story. And, you can either pitch to an executive or pitch to, a company, which is you're trying to sell your script to them. And if you're pitching in a room, you're trying to pitch your story ideas and make sure that your story ideas land.
How do you know the ideas that you're pitching are any good?
You don't know if the ideas you're pitching are good, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I think that, good is subjective. So it's really hard to know what's good and what's bad. And, you can believe in your tastes. Everybody wants to, feel like they have good tastes, but you kind of don't really know. You can get feedback from your friends and see if they end up liking your story, but I don't think there's anything such as a subjective good or subjective bad in this industry. I think it's all kind of marketability. If a project is marketable, then it'll make a lot of money and people will get excited. And even a marketable project can still fail. But I think people get most excited about marketability.
Can you explain what is marketability and how do you know that it is marketable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another kind of, you don't necessarily, you can guess what is marketable based off of what you've seen, but nobody really knows. I think that ultimately, if you're trying to say a film is marketable, then you're saying similar films in the genre have succeeded. And if, you can say, for example, a procedural, if you're, trying to sell a procedural, you can say there's this huge industry for procedurals. I think that, yeah, it's really, honestly, really difficult. And, in hindsight, it's much easier to kind of quantify.
Do you practice your pitches?
Yeah, I think it's good to practice your pitches. You should kind of, it should be relatively conversational, but you should try to figure out how you're going to sell somebody on your idea.
So when you said relatively conversational, maybe not too eager, not too salesperson, more hey, I'm here, I'm actually having coffee, more of a low-key way of doing it instead of this grandiosity of and then this happens in A, B, and C, and it becomes more the person feels this responsibility for taking you on.
I mean, I think that ultimately when it comes down to it, you're trying to make sure that the person that you're pitching your idea to kind of understands it fully. And if they might stop and ask you, hey, hang on, what about this detail? And then you might have to stop and kind of fill them in on this detail. And again, you're just having a conversation with them, making sure that they understand the characters and the world that you're kind of describing. So yeah, it's conversational in that it shouldn't sound too rehearsed.
We're going to throw some options out here. So if you were going to pitch, let's say, The Wolf of Wall Street or The Departed, your choice, how would you pitch them?
I think The Departed is spy versus spy. You can also say it's based on a very successful Hong Kong film. And ultimately two spies, one with the gangsters and one with the cops, are hunting each other. That's how I would pitch it in one sentence. And I'm sure people have, I've probably come up with better ways to pitch that as well. Wolf of Wall Street, I think, is if it's Martin Scorsese, he's saying this is a gangster, but he's a white-collar gangster. That's how I would pitch it if I was Martin Scorsese, or if I was pitching it to Martin Scorsese. But, you can say, it's been a while since I've kind of seen those movies in and out, or I don't really have a pitch prepared for it.
Sure. Okay. And Ingrid Goes West, we talked about earlier.
Yeah, Ingrid Goes West. I mean, I would say the log line at least is a social media fan embeds herself in the life of her favorite influencer in order to gain a friend. I think that's I'm just coming up with it off the top of my head, but those are kind of, but again, as you're pitching it, you're going to have to know all the ins and outs of it, which I haven't seen those movies in a little while, so I don't really know off the top of my head.
How do you get better at pitching your ideas?
Just practice. You need to practice pitching, and with experience, you'll kind of figure out what people are interested in and what stands out to people.
If you are writing a story, you may be interested in our new book, the sponsor of today's video. After months of working on a story, have you ever said to yourself, I don't know what my main character wants. Why are my side characters more interesting than my main character? 17 Steps is a workbook-style tool with specific questions to help you dive deep into your main character and story. We've linked up to 17 steps below.